Since the fall of man, a war has raged between good and evil. Over the centuries, this war has distorted the truth. Now the truth is perceived as lies, and lies acknowledged as truth. To this day, the battle continues as we investigate and debate the truth behind the history and mystery of the universe. We are Paratruth Radio. Clowns. Some find them amusing. Some find them frightening. Regardless of how you view them, one thing is for certain. You can never truly tell who they are behind the makeup.
Now Paratruth presents Bad Clowns, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? With special guest, Ben Radford.
How's it going, Parafans? Welcome to another episode of Paratruth Radio right here on the Paratruth Radio Network. My name is Justin.
And I'm Eric.
And we got another great show for you tonight. It's not going to be as angry as it was last week, so this week we have a much more lighthearted, well, I shouldn't say lighthearted because it's about bad clowns, and clowns scare the living crap out of me. But tonight we're going to have on Ben Radford, and he wrote the book Bad Clowns. So without further ado, we're going to go to the line with our guest and friend, Ben Radford. Ben, welcome back to Paratruth Radio. How are you today?
Doing good.
Good. So we are having you back on to talk about your newest book, Bad Clowns. So tell us a little bit what prompted you to do this book.
Well, there's a couple things. One is that I'd always been fascinated by the scary clowns in pop culture, right? Because they're everywhere. They're in movies and TV and films, and there's just so many creepy, scary-ass clowns out there.
Yeah.
And yet there seemed to be, almost no actual research. I mean, there was, people, they're on T-shirts with Krusty the Clown or, Bart Simpson, in the corner saying, can't sleep, clowns will eat me, that type of thing. But there wasn't really anything any actual research or scholarship or anybody actually putting it together. And so basically, I actually had the idea about 10 years ago, which is why if you look in the book, some of the interviews were actually conducted 2006. So I had the idea a decade ago, and it sort of got backburnered. I was busy with other things. I was doing graduate school and did other books. And then basically, after my last book came out, Mysterious New Mexico, I talked to the publisher there, my editor, and he's like, well, what else do you have? I'm like, well, I got a book on clowns. He's like, clowns? I was like, well, no, bad clowns. He's like, oh, I think we can work with that. So that's basically what happened.
So I know in the book you mentioned that you're not afraid of clowns, and you're not impartial to them in any way. It's kind of, they could be good, they could be bad, it's whatever. Was there any time whatsoever growing up that you were afraid that actually led you to wanting to write this book?
Not really. I mean, like most kids, I can remember, one or two scary clowns at a circus who sort of got a little too close, or you could smell some bourbon on their breath or whatever. But, there's not a particular time when I sort of go back to where I go to my safe space over the clowns. It was just basically, I even though this book, it's sort of it's out of my normal subject area, because of course I write about, as you guys know, urban legends and ghosts and monsters and Bigfoot and psychics and psychology and all that. Yet, so in a way, when I told people I'm writing a book on clowns, they're like, no, seriously. No, seriously. But, I think part of it is that, in another way, it's actually very similar, because it's like, for example, to my book on the Chupacabra. because I'm curious, sort of like the way my mind works is that I probably have like a touch of OCD where like I get really absorbed about an idea and I get really interested in like, oh, let me find out all about it. And so I just do the research, and I try to find all the examples that I can, try to basically, do as much research and understand the phenomenon as best I can, and then sort of process it and put it out to the world. So that's what I did, and that's why a lot of the subjects that I write about, chupacabras and bad clowns and things like that, they're sort of niche. I mean, they're not niche as in like no one knows about them, but they're niche in that, like, for example, I would never write a book about the Civil War or about, JFK, because, there's hundreds of books written, I got nothing to add. So typically the subjects that I'm interested in, the ones that I'm attracted to, are ones that no one has really done before. And so I figure, well, hey, if they're not going to do it, then I'll do it.
Now, growing up, the thing that scared me as far as clowns go was the movie It and the book It after I got older to read it. It kind of just stuck with me, maybe because I was younger. For all the people out there that are afraid of clowns, what do you think it does to them? Like, what does it that makes them scared of it? Them, I should say.
Scared. Well, there's a couple things, and I have I think it's chapter 3 or something. I talk about what makes clowns scary, and there's some obvious things. For example, the fact that they're in makeup, right? I mean, people who are in makeup, unless it's a hot girl, you're like, whoa, what's going on here, right? So I mean, especially an adult man in makeup, you're like, no offense, but there's something weird going on here, especially if they're already clown makeup, and clowns. They wear primary colors, and they're loud, they're larger than life, and they're loud, and you never really know what's going on behind the painted face. And so I think part of it is the anonymity. And if you go back and you look at like classic horror film villains, right? You look at like Leatherface and Michael Myers. You have these dark, and often they're silent. I mean, most clowns, the early clowns were silent as well. And also the clowns that tour around with circuses are also silent typically, because they travel from country to country, and so a clown doesn't need to speak 5 different languages. Because their stock in trade is pratfalls and seltzers and basically slapstick that everybody can see. So a lot of the actual touring clowns, the original clowns, not the party clowns, but the original clowns, they don't speak, and so you have this same sort of like the silent masked figure, and you wonder what the hell's going on here. And then there's also like more, I think, like sociocultural explanations for why clowns are scary. One of them is that clowns, they tend to sort of exist in this sort of twilight where they're sort of in between categories, right? They're human, but they're sort of they display like non-human qualities, right? They can they do magical things, right? They make a flower squirt water. They have this sort of quasi-mystical sense about them. And that's sort of one of the things that makes people uneasy about them, especially if they're outside of a context. If there's a context, right? If you go to a circus, you see a clown there, no problem, right? But on the other hand, if you hear a knock on the door at midnight and you open the door and there's a clown there, you got a problem,
right?
Well, I know within your book you go a little bit into the history of clowns, and the history actually goes back quite a bit. Can you give us just a little bit? I don't want you to give too much, obviously, so people who read the book can get their fill there. But give us a little bit of history on how the clown, I guess, began, especially the bad clown.
Sure, yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, at least I find it interesting because I spent a couple years writing a book. But it's really neat. You sort of go back to it traces back, for example, to the court jesters, or you had these figures that were often sort of thought to be, they had like special abilities. And I don't mean they could fly or anything, but they had license to speak truth. And so, for example, if there was a court jester, and he's basically the only person in the kingdom that could make fun of the king and not get killed. It's like it's all in how you frame it, right? And so he could be like, so that there was a certain license that the clowns had and court jesters have to sort of get away with things that violate the cultural norms. And so you see this theme both in the early, like the Corps Jester clowns and even the clowns today. So there's those. It also goes back to, for example, the Harlequin from the Commedia dell'arte, the character that would travel around in the jumpsuit, and you have a mask on, and the Harlequin character with the patchwork costume. And then I also trace it back to, for example, the Punch and Judy shows, which is if I actually have, for those who haven't seen it, here's the early Punch and Judy shows, and that's basically the different characters that would be seen. Would actually the first Punch and Judy show that we know was done around 1662 in Covent Gardens in England. So this has been around for about 300 years, and basically these two puppets. And the star of the show, Mr. Punch, is a brutal, nasty, infanticidal bastard. He beats his wife Judy. He kills his baby. This evil, nasty, unredeemable villain, and yet people love him. This is kids' entertainment in England. It's just fascinating.
Well, it's kind of fascinating that it kind of was that, then went to cartoons and all this other stuff that Eric and I grew up, and now it's kind of going back to the darker side for kids' entertainment. And I mean, in general, with movies, even nowadays, it's going towards paranormal compared to the typical, either thriller or monster movies. So it kind of goes in spurts, like we've talked about with a couple of guests. So the one that you had mentioned was the Harlequin, and that's actually one that, even though I'm scared of clowns, I kind of enjoy compared to other clowns. When the Harlequin was, in what time frame was the Harlequin really a big thing compared to the clowns we know today?
The Harlequin was mostly around I don't know the exact dates, but basically, most of the Harlequin stuff is around the 15th, 16th, 17th century. Well, later than that. Mm-hmm. Or, for example, you have one of the first discussions about the Harlequin was in a French poem, and I think it was 17 something, and the Harlequin character was this creature, this man, this figure that would actually go into the netherworld and meet Satan and trick Satan. So you have this whole theme of the clown figure, the trickster figure, tricking Satan, right? Tricking old Scratch, the devil himself. And so there's the clowns have always been sort of, again, an interesting blend of, there's a human side to them, and yet there's a trickster side to them. There's an evil, devilish side to them. And one of the things that I found that I hadn't really thought about until I started researching it is that as the clowns are typically they're essentially men without masters. Some are women, of course, but they're their own person, and so their allegiances change all the time. And so if you see a clown, you're never really sure, who are they working for? What are their motivations? There's always something very mysterious and somewhat sinister, because you never know exactly what a clown's going to do, or what the situation is. There's this sort of sinister ambiguity nature of clowns that I think is both attractive to people and also sort of scary to people.
Mm-hmm. Well, and just a thought of how nowadays clowns are so scary, and yet McDonald's uses the clown to bring customers in. I mean, it's kind of weird that actually works out, but why do you think that works, especially for children?
Well, yeah, there's a couple reasons for that. One is that clowns were, for most of their history, were essentially ambiguous. Mm-hmm. They were for us old D&D players, they would be considered neutral. Probably chaotic neutral, right? Going old school here, right? So I mean, clowns were never really good. They never really bad, but they were really good. They were always this sort of interesting, ambiguous, neutral characters. And most people, when they think about clowns, certainly, for example, the early Ronald McDonald clown, which is actually, I have a photo in the book of Fred Willard as the early scary ass Ronald McDonald, and I just love that one. It's just like what was it? You know, somebody was like high, and they're like, yeah, I know, we need to do. Oh, this is great. So I'll have a guy with the thing. I mean, just, no one in their right mind thought this was a good idea. It's like the same people that probably did like New Coke or something. But anyway, so the original Ronald McDonald and the earlier clowns, and for example Bozo, they were framed on TV and as personas as good clowns, right? I mean that's what that character is. Mm-hmm. But that again, that's only one specific type of clown. So what's happened, especially since about the mid '80s, I would say, since Killer Clowns from Outer Space came out, and then It in 1990, the evil or the darker character of the clowns have sort of have come to the fore. And so that's why it's interesting, because these days, I mean, it's fascinating when I was writing the book, because I would talk to people about clowns, and one of the first reactions is fear of clowns. And I wouldn't have, if I'd written this book 30 years ago, I wouldn't have gotten that reaction, because at the time most clowns were generally positive, happy things. That doesn't mean the clown character themselves were, because as I said, they're essentially ambiguous and neutral. But most of the popular clowns that you saw in the media, Bozo, Ronald McDonald, and others, were positive. And so it's a mistake to ask when clowns went bad, because they were never really good. So what's happened is that over the past 20, 30 years, the scary evil clown has become much more of a popular character in fiction and in films, and that's sort of where people gravitated to until today, when essentially that's the default clown, is the scary one, much to the chagrin of the good clowns, I'm sure.
Right.
All right, folks. I think we're going to take our first break here. You're listening to Paratruth Radio right here on the Paratruth Radio Network. We're talking to our guest and friend Ben Radford about his book, Bad Clowns. We will be right back after Eric's Random Fact of the Day.
Now, Eric's Random Fact of the Day.
Did you know that there are 46,000 species of spiders? To the arachnophobist, this is a frightening statement. The thought of spiders eating insects, and in some countries, birds. But not all spiders eat meat. According to LiveScience.com, there is one spider, called the Bagheera kiplingi, which, believe it or not, consumes plants as its majority diet. The spider lives in Central America, and is considered a rarity among its predatory cousins. But if knowing that there is a plant-eating spider out in the world makes you feel better, just remember there are at least 45,999 other spider species that enjoy consuming flesh.
This was Eric's Random Fact of the Day.
All right, folks. Welcome back to Paratruth Radio. My name is Justin.
And I'm Eric.
And we've been talking to Ben Radford about his book, Bad Clowns. Now, that is the scariest thing I've ever seen, and I will have nightmares for days now. So we kind of started to link into that it's kind of only recently that we've had this evil clown phenomenon going on. One of the people from history that actually I had talked about a little bit a couple episodes ago was, I think his name is Edward Wayne Gacy or Wayne Gacy. I can't remember.
Yes, John Wayne Gacy.
Oh, okay. So he dressed up as a clown during his serial killing. Do you think that kind of just added to the evil clown scenario, or do you think that was already in place before he got started?
Well, there's a couple things. Certainly, certainly Gacy is among probably the top 3 or 5 evil clowns. I mean, people go right to the Joker, they go to Krusty, and they go to Gacy. I mean, and of course Pennywise from Stephen King's It.
Right.
I mean, there's only a handful of like top shelf clowns. Most of them are pretty low rent, as I talked about in the book. But in the case of Gacy, there's two different parts here. The first one is that certainly Gacy is very much associated with the evil clowns, and that's actually much to his own. Some of it's his own doing, because what would happen is that after he was arrested and incarcerated, he did a bunch of self-portraits. I think probably a couple dozen of himself as Pogo the Clown. So he was very much in tune with the so-called murderabilia. The people who collect Charles Manson's toenail clippings and Richard Ramirez's sketches. It's sort of like creepy stuff where it's like, I like weird gothic occult stuff and shit like that as much as the next guy, but there's a line there. I don't need. But it's also true that that Gacy's connection to clowning is not as strong as popularly believed. So, for example, he actually wasn't a clown by trade. He was a contractor, house contractor. And it is true that he did dress up as a clown. I mean, we know that. As far as we know, he didn't actually kill anybody. It's not as if he had dressed up as a clown and trolled the elementary schools looking for victims. I mean, that's not what he did. So so there is a very true and real connection between Gacy and clowning, but it's not quite as lurid and sensational as it's often made out to be. Because of course, if you're going to do a movie or a film or an article about Gacy, how can you not mention he dressed as a clown? I mean, that's just it's the contrast is irresistible. So people make a lot of that, and understandably so. But again, it's not like he didn't kill anybody while dressed as a clown.
Right. Well, one of the things that I noticed, or that I haven't realized because I've never done research on clowns, it's something I just stay away from. But it turns out,
either. I don't blame you.
But it turns out that there's actually folklore on clowns. There's some kind of folklore out there that people, believe to be true. And one of them that you talk about is the phantom clowns. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the phantom clowns, and perhaps even tell us, unless this is it, what one of your favorite folklore pieces are on the clown.
Ooh, that's a good question. The phantom clown chapter, that's I think chapter like 8 or 9 or something in the book. And that was one of the more interesting ones because, I enjoy folklore. I'm a member of the American Folklore Society. I've written about folklore. And so a lot of what I do involves folklore, monster folklore, ghost folklore. So, I'm very much in tune with that. I love that sort of thing. I'm fascinated by it. And so when you have these characters that may or may not be real, that is, people think they're like the chupacabra, right? Lots of people think the chupacabra is real. I interviewed many of them. I mean, I know this for a fact. And yet, for those who have read my book, spoilers, it's probably not real, right? And so...
Well, and whoever heard our show with you prior know that as well.
Exactly. So if they're paying attention. So this is the thing, is that, you have these subjects which are fascinating, weird, mysterious, intriguing, and yet may or may not be real. And that was actually the case with the phantom clowns. And so basically, the phantom clowns were these characters, these people allegedly, that traveled around in vans sometimes, and sometimes by themselves, but often in vans, trying to abduct children. And there were at least a dozen reports, mostly in the mid 1980s, all the way up until a few years ago. I mean, this is not just, it had a heyday in the mid 80s, and that's when there were a lot of reports. And by a lot, I don't mean hundreds, but there were certainly a few dozen. But again, even up into the 1990s, there were a handful of reports. There was some in Scotland. There was some in Central America. But So you had these people who these kids who would say, you know, on my way to school, this, you know, white van showed up, and these two clowns were in there, and one of them tried to grab me. And you can imagine how terrifying that would be to parents, teachers, everybody else. Because people were freaking out, and you know the police were called, and searches were done. You know, clowns were stopped. But at the end of the day, there was no evidence of them. Nothing. Right? And it was just sort of, and the same process repeated over and over and over again, where there would be these reports, and you know the police investigate, and you know that they set up there's just nothing there. And you know it's important to remember that no children were actually abducted. So the story was always, it almost happens. Like, you know, I was there, and he'd reach out, and I just ran at the last minute. And there was actually one story of a guy. There was a kid. I think he was like 7 or 8 or something. He claimed that he was going on his way to school, and he encountered a clown with a machete and an Uzi machine gun. And so this 7-year-old seeing this clown with a machete in one hand and a machete in the other, this kid, smart, he throws his book bag at him. Well, as you can imagine, this terrified the clown, and he ran away screaming and shrieking like a little girl. And of course, that's the kid later admitted that the whole thing was made up. And so we know that many of the cases were hoaxes. Other ones, you know, it could have been just sort of, you know, word of mouth, a game of telephone, whatever else. And so my explanation that I put forth in the book, and I think it's right because, you know, I wrote it. I know I know this stuff. Basically, I argue that the bad clown, the phantom clown phenomena, is a variation of a broader phenomena known as phantom attackers. And if you're interested in Fortean subjects, you know about, for example, the Mad Gas from Mattoon, the Monkey Man Panic in India. There's a whole handful of these. I've actually written about them in sort of my books with Bob Bartholomew. And basically, they're these figures that sort of appear out of nowhere. They threaten people. They don't actually hurt people. They don't actually kill people or slash people. They just threaten to. Okay. And then there's all these sort of eyewitness reports that are always kind of dubious, and then it sort of goes away. And that's my explanation. I think it's pretty clear to me that's what these phantom clown panics are. But again, you know, it's if you think about it, you know, it would not be that difficult if a person truly wanted to abduct a kid. First of all, you don't need to dress as a clown to do that. Right. Second of all, even if you were going to dress as a clown to do that, this is not. It just doesn't make sense. It's not logical. It doesn't make any sense at all if you look at the evidence that there actually were one or more clowns trying to abduct kids in the 80s or even more recently. But nonetheless, you know, it's you know, there's articles about it, and it's its own little phenomenon. So it was one of the more interesting cases. And so I would say, to answer your second question, that probably is my favorite. Probably is, even though it's sort of like so gruesome and horrifying. Right. I know it's essentially an urban legend, so that's why I find it fascinating. Okay.
Well, like we've said, there's so many of these bad clowns that are fictional characters, like Pennywise. There was this clown that it was a B movie I saw on Netflix called Stitches. I don't know if you guys have seen or heard of it, but it kind of links more to a demonic style type of evil bad clown compared to like the ones from Evil Clowns from Outer Space. And I know that traditionally some clowns do a couple types of like magic tricks or illusion tricks or whatever. Do you think that there's more of a connection there as far as like the demonic or evil type of clown to magic, or is it just because people's minds roam to that because they're afraid of the clown? That is a very good question. There's a couple of answers to that. First of all,
it's important to remember that the early clowns, particularly the Harlequin, were associated with evil entities. I mean, if you look at the origin of the Harlequin, for example, it actually began as an aerial specter, basically a ghost that would visit you in the night, right? Mm-hmm. So again, this is clearly an early version of a clown. There's no doubt about it. And so even again going back, 300 years, you see this sort of evil connotation, this sort of darker side to the clowns. So again, it's always been there, but since that time, with the obvious exception of Mr. Punch, right. who's his own category. For the most part, clowns were sort of they tended to be sort of more happy and carefree, and the essential good clown. There's Stitches. There's of course keep in mind that Pennywise in Stephen King's book is sort of like this, it's never really clear what's like this paranormal entity of evil. I mean, so there's this element of magic to that too, and there's also what was the Killjoy the Clown. There's a series of B movies is probably being too kind. We'll just say like a C+ movie, and I say that with affection. The Killjoy series. So that's again, it's a straight to video, fun, scary ass clown, and that in that mythos, Killjoy is a demon, and at one point they talk about in one of the films they talk about knowing his true name, and of course that goes back to the Catholic tradition of the idea that you can have control over a demon by knowing its name, and so there's all sorts of really fascinating connotations and connections with not only grimoires, but also magic and good magic and bad magic. So, but you're exactly right in terms of like the magical connotation, right? So because think about it, like what do clowns do, right? They're funny and they're wild, but they also do magic tricks, right? They make a bouquet appear out of nowhere, right? They have squirting flowers. Their shoes are 10 times too big and yet they can run. They have clown cars as big as a copy machine that got 40 clowns in there. Yeah. So there's always this sort of this element of like magical supernatural element to it, and that's one of the things that I think sort of attracts people to it.
Well, I don't know if you cover this in your book, but the one thing that I've always heard growing up is that the majority of people who are scared of clowns when they get older, the reason behind that is because their cribs or the rooms in which they slept always had clowns in them, whether they be some kind of statues or just clowns hanging from the ceiling. So in your research, did you find any truth to that? Or is this just some kind of old wives' tale that people are telling, young children and whatnot?
These are very good questions. I'm impressed. I like being asked. No, seriously, it's kind of refreshing, to be honest. There's a couple answers to the question. Number one, it's actually a myth that most children are afraid of clowns. Okay. When you look at the research, certainly some kids are. That's absolutely true. Right. But in the chapter on colorophobia, I talk about the fact is that most kids like clowns. It's like it's sort of fashionable to think that all kids are scared of clowns, but if you look at the research, it's just not true. There was a very interesting study that came out, and it's fascinating because if you Google kids scared of clowns, you'll very likely come up with a reference to this particular study I'm about to tell you about. And there was a study that came out, I think maybe 10 years ago, maybe I'm forgetting the date, but around 10 years ago, that found that children were afraid of clown images. Okay. So there was a study that said, and it's an important distinction because what they found, and I think it was like one. It's not like there were a bunch of studies. Like there was like this one study with I don't know a couple hundred. I mean, this is not like international importance, right? But these researchers found that in the study, children did report unease or discomfort with images of clowns. For example, wallpaper. Or a photo on the wall, or a clown figurine, a figurine. Now they didn't report that with actual clowns. So there they're like, they're pooping their pants at a scary clown on the wall, but if a clown actually comes in and goes, they're like, oh, this is kind of fun, right? So that I think that's essentially where that connection came from. So,
okay.
I didn't actually see anything saying that most kids. Certainly, if you're growing up, and there's a weird clown. First of all, what parent would do this? I mean, seriously, you're just asking for CYFD to come take the kids away. I don't know about you, but so I'm sure that I think most of the stories are sort of more anecdotes, like like in my particular case, it was a scary clown. But in terms of like a broader theme, I don't think that's true. Although again, with that one exception, some kids report these sort of uneasiness with clowns. And keep in mind, this is in a hospital setting. This wasn't just clowns, in their bedrooms. This was simply in a hospital. Kids didn't like clowns on the walls.
It's weird.
It's kind of interesting that a lot of children are predisposed to not liking the image of the clown too. It's interesting. I've never really heard that before. One clown in particular or type of clown, I should say, that comes to my mind because you said clowns are usually silent is the mime. And now, is the mime quiet because the traditional clown is supposed to be quiet, or did the clown just kind of evolve over time and then the mime and the clown became two separate things?
That's a good question. I actually didn't go too far into the mime character specifically, partly because it's not really an evil clown. Typically the mimes. No, but it's a fair question, and there's they're sort of lumped together. Mm-hmm. What I found is that typically in references to mimes in the book, and I think I have like 4 or 5 of them. Typically, the mimes are the enemies of clowns. Okay. So yeah, it actually like I don't even know if I indexed it, but there's basically what I found. There's basically 3 specific enemies of clowns. Forsworn clown enemies. The first one are mimes. Okay. And if you've seen like Shakes the Clown, the Bobcat Goldthwait movie, that's just they make Goldthwait goes to town with that, the whole clown mime rivalry. Oh, okay. The other ones are bikers, right? Bikers and clowns do not they don't mix, man. You want to see blood? You put a biker and a clown together. Someone ain't walking out. And then the other one's probably like sort of locals. I talked to a guy in my chapter on dip clowns, the dunk tank clowns. Oh, okay. I interviewed a couple of those guys, and they would talk about people who hate clowns, and of course they're in the case of the dip clowns, the ones in dunk tanks, they're paid to make you hate them. I mean, that's the whole point. Is you're pissed off enough to put down $5 for some balls and throw balls at them. So the mime. Did you guys see The Aristocrats?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
The documentary film? Okay.
Yep.
I figured if anybody had, you guys had, right? So, no offense. But so there's a great scene in The Aristocrats with Billy the Mime. And you guys know what I'm talking about, and the listeners need to check it out. And I'm not going to describe it, but if there ever was a bad mime clown, it's Billy the Mime in The Aristocrats.
Well, the one thing I think, because they're obviously, like for me, I've never liked clowns, and especially after it came out, it's just, no go, no more clowns. But with mimes, I've never had any type of fear or, negative emotion towards mimes whatsoever. And during some of the research I've done, not on clowns, but just in general, especially for like film and whatnot, color can really help drive people's emotions. And black and white, which a mime is typically wearing, whether makeup or clothes or whatever, is kind of a neutral color. It's not that scary. But when you start adding, like, for example, even Ronald McDonald, when you add the red and the yellow, it's meant to push people away. That's actually why McDonald's used to keep the interior of their buildings red and yellow, so that less people would eat there, so they wouldn't have to clean up as much after them. And so red and yellow really pushes people away.
Buy it and go away. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good point. I mean, the other good thing to keep in mind, of course, is that mimes are much rarer than clowns.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're just on average, unless you seek out mimes, and really who would do that? You're not gonna run into mimes on a regular basis,
right,
as you will with clowns, unless you're sort of hanging around the hoity-toity parts of Paris or something.
Right.
So, one thing that I was just thinking about is writing this book. Was there any favorite chapter that you liked compared to the others?
Let me think. I'm sort of flipping through here. They all sort of fascinated me. The ones about the movies was interesting, of course, because that's basically a touchstone for most people in terms of where do you see evil clowns in movies. Mm-hmm. And I enjoyed it, but in some ways that chapter was less interesting to me, just because I was sort of like hitting points. I knew I had to cover, Pennywise. You got to cover blah 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 blah. Yeah, there were like basically a dozen or so clowns. House of a Thousand Corpses. So that one, it wasn't boring to me, but it was just sort of like, all right, well, I got to hit this one again. So that one was a little less interesting. Probably my favorite would either be the Phantom Clowns or the Stalking Clowns. Mm-hmm. And these were the ones where I actually covered the whole Stalking Clowns thing from the beginning, and mm-hmm. the Stalking Clowns began with the Northampton Clown. It was a clown in Northampton, England, and it was this guy, and he would dress up as a clown, and he would walk around his town at night dressed as a clown, and people would, of course, freak out as one does when you see a clown, walking around at night. And so there was this fascinating story where this guy would do this, and I think it began like 6 weeks before Halloween, and sort of led up to Halloween. There was like the Facebook thing, who is the Northampton Clown? There's this whole mm-hmm. sort of like, it was almost like it was sort of like a blend between like a publicity stunt and like performance art, this right. sort of weird thing. And then so I actually covered. I write for Discovery News and Life Science, and I wrote about that when it first happened. But then what happened was that there were copycats and copycats of copycats, mm-hmm. and so even though the Northampton Clown was the first one, within a year there were copycats. There was a Staten Island Clown, and there was actually a clown panic. There was one in California, and then another one in England. In Europe, in France. And so that was probably one of the most interesting chapters to me, just because I saw it develop in real time. Mm-hmm. I reported it on the first, and then because the thing, if you think about it, it's perfect, right? If you want to do a prank or a stunt that's guaranteed to make local news, if not national news,
right?
It's really easy.
Right.
Here's what you do. I'm not suggesting anybody do this, but here's what you do: dress up as a clown, walk around at night, and wait for something to happen. Because something, you might get shot, and frankly, you take your chances. But it's such a the news media is such saps. They're so gullible. You can't not cover that story, right? So
right. Oh,
it's
yeah.
perfect. Thanks. To like, hey, you want to do some fun? Hey, let's do this. And so that chapter was probably one of my favorite ones, just because it was so, or like, again, I covered it from start to finish, and it's still going on. I mean, I guarantee you, we can put money on this. I guarantee you that at some point before the year is out, before 2017 begins, there will be at least one or two stalking clown scares where somebody, I don't want to say some idiot, somebody will dress up as a clown in Manhattan or in Peoria or in California or in Toronto and walk around at night, and it'll be a news story, and I'm going to get the call, and I'm going to have to explain it. Luckily, I can plug my book while I'm at it, and I know this is going to happen. So, and then probably the other chapter I had fun with. I mean, the whole book was fun, but the other one that intrigued me was the clown porn. I have a chapter on sex clowns, and that was sort of so random that I was like, wow, I not my thing, but whatever, consenting adults, so I did that.
Well, the one thing that I find really interesting is just the story of the pranksters, for example. When you go on Facebook, there have been numerous times where I myself have come across these videos of the pranksters. Yeah. And it's usually done, the videos are usually done by the same people. And so I've seen 4 or 5 of them, and it's always starts off with a bloody mess, right? So they got some guy laying on the ground, his head just had blood all over, and blood all over the street, and so on and so forth. And then as the people start to investigate, the clown comes around the side of the building, with a giant hammer or a machete or something like that. And of course, exactly, right? And people are freaking out. And I always thought to myself, like, one day these guys are going to get in trouble. Right. They're going to get shot or something. And so there's this one video, and I don't remember I don't know where they were. They never state where they are, but they're in a park and they pretend to kill somebody, and the guy falls and screams, and that's it. So the clowns start chasing after a group of people, and one of the guys stops dead in his tracks, reaches down in his pants, and pulls out a handgun and points it at the clown. And I've never seen a clown that originally was so menacing turn into such a little baby so quickly, because, he rips his mask off, screams. I couldn't even tell you what he sounded like. I couldn't fathom it. It's so crazy. But screaming so loud, "It's just a joke! It's just a joke! Stop! I swear, please don't kill me!" And the guy's trying to decide if he should what he should do. Should he pull the trigger or should he walk away? I don't know what to do. But I was laughing so hard over the whole thing. It was great.
I've always thought that eventually one of these guys are going to get killed or hurt very badly.
Absolutely. Well, keep in mind, that's happened. That's actually happened to a couple Bigfoot hoaxers. There's at least one case I'm thinking of where there was a guy, I think 2 or 3 years ago, some idiot dressed up as Bigfoot and was hit by a car. He was going along the highway at night. He's like, "Oh, this will be funny. I'll make people think there's a Bigfoot around here." And I don't know if he was drunk or not, but wandered onto a freeway too close, got hit, and it's like, I feel bad for him, but on the other hand, it's like, dude,
what are you doing?
You got the whole Darwin Awards coming up, man. I mean, you got. So yeah, but it's a real problem. And what happened in France with some of the stalking clowns is that and actually a friend of mine, a folklorist in Belgium, she wrote about this. I talked to her about it, and there were actually basically people who were committing crimes under the guise of clowns, and so they were actually criminals. And this is very, very rare. There's only been a few cases. Usually, it's just pranksters who are sort of having fun until someone gets shot. But yeah, I mean, there were a couple cases where somebody would commit a crime as a clown. Now, keep in mind, if you think about it, that's a really bad idea for a couple reasons. Number one is that you stand out, right? If you want to commit a crime and you don't want to be caught, don't dress as a clown because the likelihood that you're going to be among other clowns and blend in, unless you happen to be at a clown conference, are pretty small. Right. So just from a logical point of view, it doesn't make sense that people would commit crimes dressed as clown and trying to get away with it.
Right. Mm-hmm. It's true. Well, we are going to take our last break here. We are talking to Ben Radford on his book Bad Clowns, but we will be right back after Justin's paranormal headlines.
And now, Paratruth Radio's paranormal headlines.
How's it going, Parafans? Justin here with your paranormal headlines. And this headline is from usnews.com. Unicorns were real, and a new fossil shows when they lived. The well-preserved skull probably won't tell us whether their blood had magical properties, though. dreams do come true, sort of. According to a study published in the American Journal of Applied Sciences, the Siberian unicorn last walked the Earth about 29,000 years ago. Scientists previously thought the creature with the partially mythical name died out about 350,000 years ago, but a newly discovered fossilized skull reveals it lived here much more recently. The skull was found in the Pavlodar region of Kazakhstan, and scientists hope it will help shed light on how some members of the species apparently were able to survive as long as they did. Before you get too excited, though, here's the catch. The Siberian unicorn really looked like more of a rhinoceros than a horse. It reportedly stood about 6 feet 6 inches tall, measured around 15 feet long, and weighed about 8,000 pounds. As Science Alert explains, that's closer to the woolly mammoth-sized than a horse-sized. And this has been Justin with your Paranormal Headlines.
This was a segment of Paratruth Radio's Paranormal Headlines.
What's up, folks? Welcome back to Paratruth Radio. My name is Eric.
And I'm Justin.
And we are speaking with Ben Radford, the author of Bad Clowns. Unfortunately, this is the worst part of the day. As we all know, it's time to go. It is getting to the end of the show. But before we go, Ben, I just want to thank you for being on. And I would like to give you a moment to tell everyone where they can find you, where they can find your book, and any additional information you'd like to share.
Sure. Well, I'm around and about. You can find me at BenjaminRadford.com. That's Benjamin as in Franklin. Radford as in Robert Redford with an A. That's kind of cute. Anyway, BenjaminRadford.com. I'm easy to find. I'm the only guy that wrote a book on bad clowns and chupacabras, so keep that in mind. You can find me on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I do stuff like that. You can find my work at Discovery News, sometimes on LifeScience.com. Blogs here, there, everywhere. On Paratruth Radio.
Yep.
And I'm around and about, and I write about a variety of things, and I'm giving talks on my new book, Bad Clowns, and maybe later on this year I'll have a book on scientific ghost investigations. Keep in mind for that.
Yeah. We'll definitely keep you in mind for that, because one of the requests that I've heard a couple of times for Paratruth Radio is more ghosts. So we will definitely keep that in mind. So thank you so much, Ben. As it was last time, such a blast having you on, and you're an amazing guest as always. So keep us tuned in to what's going on, especially with the new book coming, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
Great. Thanks for having me on. Good to talk to you guys.
All right. Have a good night.
All right. See ya.
All right, folks. That was Ben Radford, author of Bad Clowns. Always an amazing guest. I enjoyed having him on as much as I did last time. And Eric's enjoying a Capri Sun.
This isn't free advertisement, guys. Come on. I need some money here.
So definitely a great guy. I enjoy having him on. So we got a lot of great stuff still coming up for you guys within the next couple of weeks on Paratruth Radio and PTRN. Hopefully Jerry will be coming back real soon. She's had some complications with moving and whatnot.
It happens.
Yeah. So that's all we got on Bad Clowns. You know, like I said at the beginning, they scare the living daylights out of me, but I think that's about all I can say about them. One thing I did want to ask you, Eric, out of all of the fictional bad clowns, is there one that scared you more than others?
Oh. I mean, It's always been Pennywise, man.
I know.
It's always been freaking Pennywise.
Back to Pennywise.
Gosh dang it. That's really where it started. That's where it'll end one day. But yeah, and it's interesting because they're actually coming out with a new film.
Right, remake,
you know? And it's just like, oh man, I don't know if I want to see it. But
well, I don't know if they recasted the guy, but I want to say it was Jesse Eisenberg that was going to originally do it, but I might be wrong on that. But whoever it was, he was doing such a dark character. They're like, we can't air this. We have to go a different route. So unless they kept it, but there was an article that was posted saying whoever the actor was doing such a good role that he was portraying the darkest Pennywise they had ever seen. So definitely interesting. I'll probably have to see it just to see how in comparison it is. It'll probably make my fear of clowns even worse.
Yeah.
to say the least. So, I do have a good announcement for you guys. I am done with my revisions of my book. I just have to enter them. It's been a long time coming, so I'm rather proud of myself, even though I shouldn't have pride. I do feel a sense of accomplishment, if you will. Mm-hmm. So next step will be to get those revisions entered into the electronic copy and get it out to publishers. So I'm proud of that.
Awesome.
Any announcements for you as far as the movie or any new movies coming up?
We are officially 4 weeks out from completion of the Revealed. Now that doesn't mean that everyone's going to be able to see it, unfortunately. I've got to run the festival circuit, which means I can't share it amongst anybody. But we are 4 weeks out from finishing the film completely. I actually just met with my composer today, my music composer. Phenomenal stuff. I'm telling you, he wrote some phenomenal stuff. And actually, the music supervisor was there with us, and we were watching it. And he knows the film. He's seen it. And there's a part of the film, this one scene where I'll just say something happens, and he knew it was coming. He knew it was coming the entire time, and he still jumped. It was very visual. He still jumped out of his seat, and he was like, I knew that was coming. I was like, here it is, boom, still scared me. So that's what he said. So that's great news. That's a good thing. I like hearing that stuff. We have a couple of revisions in regards to music. There's a couple of things we want to add on and move around a little bit, make a little bit darker here and there. Mm-hmm. And beside that, I've got to start coloring this week. Special effects are done. I think I said that a week or two ago. And I'm finishing my audio, basically. I got a couple small things to add here. I'm actually going to do some work right after I get off the radio show and move from there. But it's getting really close. We're almost done. We've almost made it the whole way. It's been a long time, it feels like.
Well, just like the podcast that I listen to, I hate waiting. I hate the anticipation of that show coming out. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing it, dude. I mean, we both have imaginations, as I've shared some of my recent dreams and ideas with you. It's just, and folks, as Eric has talked about on air once before, he did have a dream journal that scared the living daylights out of a couple of people. Wish you still had that, but
yeah. That's all right here.
I'm sure you still retain a lot of them. And that's something I've shared with Heidi. Like, she has she always never remembers dreams, even if she does dream. And I'm like, I don't always remember, but ones that specifically jump out to me, even if I'm not going to make a book out of them, I can still recall vividly.
Yeah.
Usually because they scared the daylights out of me. Right. So, did want to let you guys know, too, that we did take down the chat on Paratruth Radio and PTRnetwork.com. Websites are still up, so I do encourage you guys to even just visit those. If you would like to donate to Paratruth Radio Network or Paratruth Radio itself, that is up there as well to help us fund the continuation of the network and the show. So with taking down the chat, I do want to encourage you guys to hop on Twitter and when the show is live, tweet us while you're listening, and or just hashtag us in the tweet, whatever. As well as I do encourage you guys to find us on Facebook, find the PTR and group on Facebook and Twitter. We're on LinkedIn. We're on Google+. We're everywhere, guys. I do want to tell you guys too, regarding the groups, I'm probably going to stop posting the show in groups other than PTRN and maybe a couple of the other podcast groups, because it is getting to the point where Facebook is blocking or even stopping people, especially myself included, in posting stuff on the social media, on Facebook anyways. Other places are not, other social medias. So I encourage you to get on Spreaker, follow us on Spreaker, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and if you guys listen anywhere else like iHeartRadio, Podkicker, any other the pods that are out there,
P-pods. It doesn't matter.
Keep listening on those as well. But if you ever want like notifications, follow us on YouTube or Spreaker, because you will get a notification that a new show is up. All right. Any final words before we head out?
You guys are awesome.
You guys are awesome. On that note, that has been the show for this week. Until next time, where you will find us same time, same channel on the Paratruth Radio Network. My name is Justin.
And I'm Eric. Peace. If you enjoyed this episode of Paratruth Radio and you would like to listen to it again, or are interested in listening to any of our past episodes, then you can listen to them on HD at our website, paratruthradio.com.
And you can also find us at Stitcher, Blueberry, TuneIn, iTunes, Spreaker, and YouTube.
And of course, like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter for brand new updates of our show every day.